Alright, I would like to introduce you to my very late 1800s Varley Cyclops sewing machine. I got this from Varley, Ontario, and it was totally unusable and in awful condition. I still have to refinish it, but my goal here was to use this machine, which I got for $50, and see if I could bring it back to life. I also wanted to use it as a learning experience to understand some of the transition between the different eras of sewing machine. So this machine, in particular, is one of the Singer 12 clones. It's a transverse shuttle. And obviously, if you know about your history of the Singer 12, that was the first really high quantity selling sewing machine that made Isaac Singer very rich, and also brought sewing machines to the average person. Prior to that, they were either very unreliable, very large and heavy, clumsy, poor quality stitching, and just largely it wasn't a possibility to have true success with them. So most people in their houses would have had to have sewn everything by hand. So if you've ever sewn by hand, you can do a beautiful job, of course, and haute couture, of course, relies on the fact that hand sewing will have to take place. However, a lot of bulk sewing, just joining things together, only requires the straight stitch. And no matter how fast you are as a hand sewer, you would struggle to match a sewing machine, which is why suddenly they became very popular, because they were so affordable and they worked. So my challenge on this machine was to see if I could bring it back to life. So everything was rusted solid. You couldn't sew on it without making it a mess of everything. It was sort of seized. It really was dead. However, that was only somewhat on the surface. The innards were largely working. So I was able to clean it up and bring it back to life. The only slight issue I have with it at the end of all my work is that the bobbin tension is just slightly too loose. So because of the construction of the bobbin, I'm trying to figure out how I can actually fix that successfully. It's not critical, and it produces a very serviceable stitch, almost perfect. And I will show you that later. But what was interesting, I'm thinking, how would you greet this sewing machine if you were moving from hand sewing and had no machine and you got one of these? Of course, at the time it would have been beautifully decorated in gold. It's a bit tired now, but eventually I hope to replace the finish and put all the decals on it. But it's interesting because it's slightly noisy, but it's very mechanical, which is kind of fun for the Victorian era. And if you had to do miles and miles and miles stitching, this thing is quite something. It works really well. So you hear the gears, but it sews essentially perfectly, except for the slight adjustment in the bobbin tension, which I will figure out. And then there's absolutely nothing wrong with this. It's not got as long stitches as we get used to in this day and age. But, I mean, if you had to sew something and your only choice was hand sewing, this is just amazing. And the other thing which is really nifty about this, so I'm sewing a single layer of cotton here. I did a test on thick cotton, and that bobbin tension works perfectly on thick cotton, so I'm glad to say that. But the other thing that I found really interesting about this machine is how light it is. I've sort of gotten used to vintage machines as being super heavy, but I haven't weighed it, but it's not nearly as heavy as the big machines. So in some ways, though I don't have the lid, I would love to get the lid for this. And if I could find the Singer 12 lid, it might actually fit. Imagine that you could actually carry this around quite easily. It will also treadle, which I thought was fun. I can see the space for the treadle now. But it's got sort of that mechanical noise. But you could just do miles and miles and miles of stitching. It's very reliable. It's really quite surprising. I didn't know what to expect, and I think it's kind of fun. So, really, you could put this away on your boat or wherever and always have a straight stitch sewing machine handy, which doesn't need any power, like many of them, but it's smaller and lighter, so it actually fits in a smaller place. But I'm very pleased with not only myself for getting this thing back up and running, but also the fact that it does so quite well. So it's something you could actually make an outfit on without any problem whatsoever, and I think that's just pretty nifty as far as things go. So I thought it'd be fun to show you my Varley Cyclops. All I know about the year of its production, I've got serial numbers and everything else on the front, but it has a badge on it which says Varley and Wolfenden, which was the first corporation partnership really that Varley had, and they disbanded in about, I think it was 1895 or 1896. So the latest this machine could possibly be is about then 1895, 1896. It could, and I'm not sure how much in advance. But what's interesting is when this machine was being produced, of course Singer, 10 years before, or maybe almost 20, had started coming out, 1879, with the Singer 15, which is still manufactured to this day. And it's interesting because how much quieter that type of machine would be than this original version of the sewing machine. But I think it's just nifty. You know, imagine you can go and do all your sewing, and away you go. So here's my Varley Cyclops. So eventually I hope to refinish it so it'll be a piece of beauty once again. But it works. It's kind of neat, and I hope you found that interesting as a bit of fun history. Bye for now.